From nearly suffocating Ben Affleck in a $1.5 million spacesuit to using the asteroid set as Wilson's basement on Home Improvement, Michael Bay's explosive disaster epic hides some truly bizarre behind-the-scenes secrets that are almost as wild as the plot itself. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Armageddon. Bruce Willis was contractually forced into the movie. Bruce Willis was contractually forced to star in Armageddon, and the story behind how he ended up in the movie is almost as dramatic as the film itself. The whole situation started with a completely different project called Broadway Brawler, which was supposed to be a romantic sports comedy where Willis would play a retired ice hockey player alongside Maura Tierney. Disney had high hopes for the film, thinking it could capture the same magic as Jerry Maguire, which had been a huge success just 2 years earlier in 1996. But things went terribly wrong on the Broadway Brawler set, and Willis was at the center of all the problems. He became extremely difficult to work with, constantly complaining about the cast and crew and causing major disruptions during filming. His behavior was so bad that several cast and crew members were actually fired because of his demands and complaints. The production became such a nightmare that Disney eventually had to shut down the entire project, which had already cost them $28 million. Disney was furious about losing all that money and decided to take legal action against Willis. They sued him for $17.5 million, holding him responsible for destroying the production. Facing this massive lawsuit, Willis and his representatives worked out a deal with Disney to avoid going to court. Instead of paying the money, Willis agreed to star in 3 Disney films at drastically reduced pay rates. For Armageddon, which was the first of these 3 contractual obligation films, Willis received only $3 million instead of his usual $20 million fee. The other 2 films in the deal were The Sixth Sense and The Kid. Ironically, this forced arrangement ended up being incredibly beneficial for Willis's career, as both Armageddon and The Sixth Sense became massive hits and reminded Hollywood why he was such a valuable star. Ben Affleck nearly died in a spacesuit. Ben Affleck nearly died during the filming of Armageddon when his spacesuit malfunctioned in what could have been a fatal accident on set. The incident happened during one of the most challenging scenes to film, where the actors had to wear incredibly complex and expensive spacesuits that were designed specifically for the movie. These weren't just regular movie costumes, but sophisticated pieces of equipment that were made from heavy nylon-like materials and weighed over 70 pounds each. The spacesuits were notorious for causing problems throughout the entire production, and Michael Bay later called them the biggest nightmare of the entire shoot. The helmets were particularly dangerous because they were constructed from fiberglass and had to house special LED lights for the dramatic lighting effects that Bay wanted. The original designs were so problematic that the production team had to spend weeks redesigning them and adding special demisting fans to make sure the actors could breathe properly inside the helmets. During filming of a scene where Affleck's character was supposed to be walking around after a shuttle crash, Bay was directing from a distance and kept noticing that Affleck seemed to be looking down and moving strangely. Bay was filming the scene from far away and couldn't immediately tell what was happening, but he could see Affleck leaning over repeatedly as if he was searching for something on the ground. When Bay finally yelled "cut" and ran over to check on him, he discovered that Affleck's air supply had completely shut off inside the helmet. The actor was desperately looking for any kind of rock or hard object that he could use to smash open his helmet so he could breathe. Bay later described the terrifying moment, explaining that Affleck was trying to find something to break his mask because he couldn't get any oxygen. The production team had to run like a football field distance to reach him and get his helmet off safely. NASA uses it as training material. NASA actually uses Armageddon as a training tool in their management programs, turning Michael Bay's action-packed disaster movie into an educational exercise for new managers and employees. The space agency shows the film during their management training sessions and challenges participants to identify as many scientific errors and impossibilities as they can find throughout the movie. This unusual training method has become a popular and effective way to teach critical thinking and attention to detail in a fun and engaging format. The exercise has proven to be incredibly successful because there are so many scientific problems to spot in the film. NASA trainees and managers have identified at least 168 different errors so far, ranging from basic physics violations to completely impossible scenarios involving space travel and asteroid behavior. Some of the most obvious mistakes include things like sound effects in the vacuum of space, characters walking around on the asteroid without proper consideration for its minimal gravity, and the absurd idea that two space shuttles could launch simultaneously from launch pads that are actually miles apart in real life. The training program also highlights more complex scientific issues, such as the fact that the asteroid in the movie is described as being the size of Texas, which would make it impossibly large compared to any known potentially dangerous asteroids. The largest known potentially hazardous asteroid is only about 4 miles in diameter, making the movie's premise completely unrealistic from a scientific standpoint. What makes this training exercise particularly interesting is that NASA actually cooperated with the filmmakers during production, providing technical advisors and allowing the cast and crew to film at real NASA facilities. Despite this cooperation, the agency includes a disclaimer at the end of the movie's credits stating that their assistance doesn't reflect an endorsement of the film's scientific accuracy. The training program has become so popular that it's now a regular part of NASA's educational approach, proving that even wildly inaccurate movies can serve valuable educational purposes. The spacesuits cost more than most movies. The spacesuits in Armageddon cost the production an incredible $1.5 million, making them some of the most expensive costumes ever created for a movie. This astronomical price tag came about because Michael Bay was absolutely horrified by the original spacesuit designs that the costume department had created for the film. When he went to check on the costume progress just 3 weeks before filming was scheduled to begin, he discovered what he described as suits that looked like an Adidas jogging suit on a rack. Bay's breaking point came when he found someone spray painting a regular gardening glove gray and sewing rubber pieces onto the knuckles to make it look futuristic. He knew that these cheap-looking costumes would completely ruin the movie's credibility and visual impact, so he demanded that the entire spacesuit design be scrapped and started over from scratch. This decision created a major crisis for the production because they were running out of time before filming had to begin. The cultural differences between American and French filmmaking approaches made the situation even more complicated. Bay worked with a French costume designer who had a very different artistic vision that emphasized minimalism and style over the big-budget American blockbuster look that Bay needed. In the DVD commentary, Bay explained the problem by saying that the French approach was too artistic for a major American movie where the spacesuits had to work perfectly for big movie stars. The final spacesuits were incredibly complex pieces of equipment that weighed over 70 pounds each and were constructed from heavy nylon-like materials. Each suit included a fiberglass helmet with built-in LED lighting systems, a front and backpack, specially modified Adidas boots covered with futuristic components, and gloves with metal locking rings. The helmets alone required special demisting fans to keep the actors from suffocating, and the suits were so sophisticated that NASA later asked the helmet designer to work on real spacesuit projects. Affleck got $20,000 worth of dental work. Ben Affleck was forced to undergo $20,000 worth of dental work during the production of Armageddon because Michael Bay decided his natural teeth weren't suitable for a leading man in a major blockbuster movie. The director noticed early in filming that Affleck's teeth looked like what he described as baby teeth when they appeared on camera, and Bay was convinced that this would hurt the movie's overall visual impact and Affleck's credibility as an action hero. Bay was known for his obsession with visual perfection and had very specific ideas about how his actors should look on screen. He and producer Jerry Bruckheimer had already told Affleck to go to the gym, get a tan, and make other physical improvements for the role. But the teeth issue became a major concern when they saw the early footage. Bay mentioned in the DVD commentary that Bruckheimer had previously paid for dental work for another famous star in a different plane movie, suggesting that this kind of cosmetic enhancement was something they considered a normal part of preparing actors for big-budget action films. The dental transformation was an incredibly time-consuming and expensive process that required Affleck to spend 8 hours a day for an entire week sitting in a dentist's chair. The procedure involved completely replacing his existing teeth with a new set that would look better on camera and give him the more mature, heroic appearance that Bay wanted for the character of A.J. Frost. The $20,000 cost was just one small part of Armageddon's massive $140 million budget, but it shows how far the filmmakers were willing to go to achieve their vision. This extensive dental work was completed while the movie was already in production, which meant that Affleck had to balance his time between filming scenes and spending long hours getting his teeth worked on. The investment paid off from Bay's perspective, as the new teeth gave Affleck the more polished Hollywood leading man look that became part of his image in later films. The asteroid set became Wilson's basement. The massive asteroid set from Armageddon ended up getting a second life as Wilson's basement cave in the series finale of Home Improvement, creating an unexpected connection between two completely different Disney productions. After Armageddon finished filming, the elaborate asteroid set was still standing on one of the sound stages at the Disney Studios lot in Burbank, where both movies happened to be produced under Disney's Touchstone Pictures label. Richard Karn, who played Al Borland on Home Improvement, was walking around the studio lot when he stumbled upon the incredible asteroid set that had been built for Armageddon. The set was one of the largest and most impressive pieces of construction on the entire Disney lot, featuring rocky, cave-like structures that had been built to look like the surface and interior of a massive space rock. Karn immediately realized that this amazing set would be perfect for a special scene they wanted to film for their upcoming series finale. Karn approached Tim Allen with the idea of using the asteroid set for their show, and Allen was immediately interested in the possibility. Allen then went to Bob Iger, who was an ABC executive at the time and would later become Disney's CEO, to ask for permission to use the set. Iger contacted Michael Bay directly to get approval for the Home Improvement team to film on the Armageddon set. Bay agreed to let them use the set, but he had one important condition. He insisted that they wait at least 6 months after Armageddon was released in theaters before filming their scene, so there wouldn't be any confusion or conflict between the two projects. However, the timing worked out differently than planned, and Armageddon actually came out 4 months before the Home Improvement episode aired. The final scene showed Wilson's basement as a mysterious cave-like space, giving viewers a completely different perspective on the familiar character's home while secretly recycling one of the most expensive movie sets ever built. Deep Impact was born from corporate espionage. The creation of Armageddon may have started with what amounted to corporate espionage, according to Bruce Joel Rubin, the screenwriter who wrote Deep Impact. Rubin claims that a Disney executive essentially stole his asteroid movie idea during what seemed like a casual business lunch and immediately began developing it as a competing film at Disney. This alleged act of Hollywood idea theft led to one of the most famous examples of dueling movies in cinema history. According to Rubin's account, he was having lunch with a production president at Disney to discuss his script for Deep Impact, which was about an asteroid threatening to destroy Earth. During their conversation, the Disney executive appeared to be taking detailed notes about everything Rubin said regarding his script's plot, characters, and gossips. Rubin thought this was normal business behavior and didn't suspect anything unusual was happening during their meeting. However, shortly after this lunch meeting, Disney began developing their own asteroid disaster movie that would become Armageddon. Rubin believes that the Disney executive used the information he gathered during their lunch to create a competing project that would beat Deep Impact to theaters, or at least split the audience for asteroid movies. This kind of competitive development is not uncommon in Hollywood, where studios often rush similar projects into production when they learn about a rival studio's plans. The strategy worked from a commercial standpoint, as both movies were released in 1998 within just a few months of each other. Deep Impact came out first in May, while Armageddon followed in July. Although Deep Impact was generally considered more scientifically accurate and received better critical reviews, Armageddon became the bigger box office success and had a much greater cultural impact. The two films became the perfect example of how Hollywood studios compete by developing similar projects simultaneously, regardless of how those projects might have originated. Sean Connery almost played Harry Stamper. Sean Connery was originally considered to play Harry Stamper, the tough oil driller leader in Armageddon, but Michael Bay ultimately decided to go with a younger actor after doing research into the real world of oil drilling. The legendary Scottish actor, who was already famous for playing James Bond and had recently worked with producer Jerry Bruckheimer on The Rock just 2 years earlier, seemed like a natural choice for the role of the grizzled, experienced driller who would lead the mission to save Earth. Bay had a great working relationship with Connery from their collaboration on The Rock, where Connery played an aging prisoner who becomes an unlikely hero. The director had enormous respect for Connery's professionalism and screen presence, describing him as a true movie star with an incredible work ethic. Bay even included a reference to The Rock in Armageddon as a tribute to his experience working with the legendary actor. However, Bay's approach to filmmaking involved extensive research to make his movies feel as authentic as possible, even when dealing with completely fictional scenarios. As part of his preparation for Armageddon, Bay spent time meeting with real oil drillers and visiting actual drilling operations to understand the industry and the people who work in it. During these research trips, he discovered that the oil drilling workforce was much younger than he had originally imagined. The real oil drillers Bay met were typically younger, more physically robust men who could handle the extremely demanding physical requirements of deep-core drilling work. This realization made him reconsider the casting for Harry Stamper, as he wanted the character to feel believable and authentic to audiences, especially those who might have experience with the oil industry. Bay decided that casting a younger actor would make the character more credible and help the audience believe that this person could actually perform the incredibly difficult physical work required for the mission. Bradley Cooper auditioned for Ben Affleck's role. Bradley Cooper auditioned for the role of A.J. Frost in Armageddon long before he became the major Hollywood star that audiences know today. In 1997, when the casting for Armageddon was taking place, Cooper was still a relatively unknown actor trying to break into the film industry and land his first significant movie role. At that time, he was far from the A-list celebrity he would eventually become through later projects like The Hangover, Silver Linings Playbook, and A Star is Born. The role of A.J. Frost was crucial to the movie's plot, as the character serves as both the romantic lead opposite Liv Tyler's Grace Stamper and the young hotshot driller who has to prove himself worthy of both Harry Stamper's respect and his daughter's love. The casting directors were looking for an actor who could handle both the action sequences and the emotional romantic storyline that was added to the script after the success of Titanic showed how important love stories were to blockbuster movies. Cooper would have brought a very different energy to the role compared to Ben Affleck, who ultimately got the part. At the time of the audition, Affleck was also still building his career, though he had recently gained attention for his work as a writer on Good Will Hunting alongside his longtime friend Matt Damon. The casting decision to go with Affleck instead of Cooper was likely influenced by multiple factors, including chemistry tests with other actors, physical appearance, and how well each actor fit Michael Bay's vision for the character. Looking back, it's fascinating to imagine how different Armageddon might have been with Cooper in the role, especially considering the very different acting styles and screen presence that each actor brings to their performances. Cooper's more intense, method-acting approach contrasts significantly with Affleck's more laid-back, naturalistic style, which ultimately fit better with the ensemble cast dynamic that Bay was trying to create. The character names hide a historical mystery. One of Armageddon's most obscure characters carries the exact same name as a real person who was involved in one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. The character Freddie Noonan appears throughout the movie but is essentially treated as an afterthought, with very few lines and minimal screen time compared to the other oil drillers on Harry Stamper's team. Most viewers probably don't even notice this character or remember his name, but the writers chose to give him the identical name of Fred Noonan, who was Amelia Earhart's navigator when they both disappeared over the Pacific Ocean in 1937. The real Fred Noonan was an experienced navigator who had worked for Pan American Airways and was considered one of the best aviation navigators of his time. He was chosen to accompany Amelia Earhart on her attempt to fly around the world, which was supposed to be the culmination of her pioneering aviation career. On July 2, 1937, Earhart and Noonan took off from New Guinea, heading toward Howland Island in the Pacific, but they never arrived at their destination and were never seen again. The disappearance of Earhart and Noonan became one of the most famous mysteries in aviation history, spawning countless theories, investigations, and searches that continue even today. While Amelia Earhart became a legendary figure whose name is known around the world, Fred Noonan has largely been forgotten by history, even though he shared the same fate and was equally skilled in his profession. The choice to name a minor character in Armageddon after this historical figure seems intentional, creating a subtle connection between the movie's themes of aviation, dangerous missions, and people who risk their lives in the sky. Like the real Fred Noonan, the movie's Freddie Noonan is part of a dangerous mission that could easily result in death, and both characters represent the often overlooked individuals who play crucial roles in historic events, but don't always get the recognition they deserve. Steve Buscemi only did it for real estate. Steve Buscemi gave one of the most refreshingly honest explanations for taking a role in a big-budget blockbuster when he was asked why he decided to appear in Armageddon as the eccentric geologist Rockhound. His answer was wonderfully straightforward and completely without pretense: "I wanted a bigger house." This simple response perfectly captured Buscemi's no-nonsense attitude and his practical approach to choosing movie projects during that phase of his career. At the time Armageddon was being cast in the mid-1990s, Buscemi had built a reputation as one of the most talented character actors in independent cinema, known for his memorable roles in films like Reservoir Dogs, Fargo, and Con Air. He had been consistently playing sleazy, quirky, or downright villainous characters, and he was actually looking for a change of pace when the Armageddon opportunity came along. The role of Rockhound was originally written as a more straightforward, likable character, which appealed to Buscemi as a departure from his usual tough guy roles. However, after Buscemi was cast, the filmmakers began rewriting the script to make Rockhound more eccentric and sleazy, essentially tailoring the character to fit Buscemi's established screen persona. This meant that despite his hopes for playing a different type of character, he ended up portraying another quirky outsider, though this time in a much more high-profile and well-paying production. The financial motivation behind Buscemi's decision was completely understandable, as Armageddon represented a significant payday compared to the independent films he had been making. The movie's massive budget meant that even supporting actors could earn substantial salaries, and for someone like Buscemi who had spent years doing lower-budget projects, the opportunity to make enough money for a real estate upgrade was too good to pass up. His honest admission about wanting a bigger house became a classic example of an actor being refreshingly candid about the business side of Hollywood. The film sparked citywide panic. Armageddon's advertising campaign was so realistic and intense that it actually caused panic in several cities across the country, with people genuinely believing they were seeing real emergency warnings about an incoming asteroid threat. The marketing team at Disney created billboards and advertisements that were deliberately designed to look like authentic government emergency announcements, complete with official-looking graphics and urgent warning messages that didn't immediately identify themselves as movie promotions. The advertising campaign was part of a massive marketing push that included a $2.5 million commercial during Super Bowl 32, making it one of the most expensive movie promotions of its time. The billboards used stark, dramatic imagery and text that resembled the kind of emergency broadcasts or public service announcements that government agencies might use during a real crisis. The design was so convincing that many people who saw these advertisements initially thought they were looking at actual warnings from NASA or other official sources. In several cities, local authorities and emergency services received phone calls from concerned citizens who had seen the billboards and thought there was a genuine asteroid emergency happening. People were calling to ask if they needed to evacuate, whether the government was hiding information about an impending disaster, or what they should do to protect their families from the supposed incoming threat. The realistic nature of the advertising created enough confusion that some cities had to issue clarifications explaining that the billboards were just movie advertisements. This incident highlighted how effective but potentially problematic realistic advertising campaigns could be, especially when dealing with disaster scenarios that people might actually worry about in real life. The success of the campaign in generating buzz and attention for the movie came at the cost of creating genuine fear and confusion among the public, demonstrating the fine line between effective marketing and responsible communication when using themes that could cause real panic. Lawrence Tierney's deleted death scene. Lawrence Tierney, the legendary tough guy actor known for playing gangsters and villains throughout his career, filmed a scene as Bruce Willis's father in Armageddon, but discovered in the most heartbreaking way possible that his work had been cut from the movie. Tierney, who was famous for his roles in classic films like Dillinger and later gained a new generation of fans through his appearance in Reservoir Dogs, was cast to play Harry Stamper's aging father in what would have been an emotional farewell scene. The scene was meant to show Harry visiting his elderly, disabled father before leaving on the dangerous mission to destroy the asteroid, adding another layer of personal stakes to the character's journey. Tierney filmed his part as scheduled, delivering what was described as a touching performance that would have given audiences more insight into Harry's family background and motivation for taking on such a risky assignment. The scene was originally included in the director's cut and was considered an important character development moment. However, when the final theatrical version was being edited, the scene with Tierney was removed, likely due to pacing concerns or the need to keep the movie's runtime manageable. Unfortunately, nobody informed Tierney that his scene had been cut from the version that would be shown in theaters. The veteran actor attended the movie's premiere, expecting to see his work on the big screen, only to discover that his entire contribution to the film had been removed. This experience was particularly devastating for Tierney, who was already in poor health at the time of filming. He had suffered previous strokes and was dealing with various health issues that had limited his acting opportunities in his later years. The disappointment of having his scene cut, combined with his declining health, made this one of the final chapters in his long and storied career. Tierney died just a short time after the movie's release, making his deleted appearance in Armageddon one of his last professional acting efforts. Aerosmith's only #1 hit came from this movie. Aerosmith achieved their first and only #1 hit single with I Don't Want to Miss a Thing, the theme song from Armageddon, despite having been one of America's most successful rock bands for over 2 decades. This remarkable fact becomes even more surprising when you consider that Aerosmith had been creating classic rock anthems since the early 1970s, with legendary songs like Dream On, Sweet Emotion, Walk This Way, and Livin' on the Edge, that defined multiple generations of rock music but never quite reached the top spot on the charts. The connection between Aerosmith and Armageddon was deeply personal, as the movie starred Steven Tyler's daughter, Liv Tyler, in the role of Grace Stamper, the female lead, who serves as both the emotional heart of the story and the romantic interest for Ben Affleck's character. This family connection made the band's involvement in the soundtrack feel natural and meaningful, creating a unique situation where a father was providing the musical backdrop for his daughter's major Hollywood debut. The song itself was written by Diane Warren, one of the most successful and prolific songwriters in the music industry, who had crafted hits for countless artists across multiple genres. Producer Jerry Bruckheimer and director Michael Bay specifically wanted Aerosmith to perform Warren's composition because they felt the band's powerful rock sound would perfectly complement the movie's emotional and dramatic themes. They invited the band to their editing room to watch clips from the film, and Aerosmith was so impressed by what they saw that they agreed to record the song just 3 days later. The success of I Don't Want to Miss a Thing was unprecedented for the band, reaching #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and staying there for 4 weeks. The song's massive popularity helped introduce Aerosmith to a completely new generation of fans, while also serving as the perfect soundtrack moment for one of the biggest blockbuster movies of 1998. The Criterion Collection added it as art. The Criterion Collection, which is widely regarded as the most prestigious home video distributor of classic and important films, shocked the film world by releasing Armageddon in their catalog, despite the movie's terrible critical reception and reputation as mindless entertainment. The Criterion Collection has built its reputation over decades by carefully selecting films that they consider to be important classic and contemporary films, and cinema at its finest, typically focusing on foreign art films, classic Hollywood masterpieces, and works by acclaimed auteur directors. The decision to include Armageddon in their collection was so unexpected that it became a major talking point among film critics, scholars, and movie enthusiasts who couldn't understand how a Michael Bay blockbuster ended up alongside films by directors like Ingmar Bergman, Akira Kurosawa, and Federico Fellini. The movie had received harsh reviews from critics, with Roger Ebert calling it an assault on the ears, the eyes, the brain, common sense, and the human desire to be entertained, and naming it one of the worst films ever made. However, the Criterion Collection had a defender for their controversial choice in film scholar Jeanine Basinger, who had actually taught Michael Bay when he was a student at Wesleyan University. Basinger wrote an essay supporting the selection of Armageddon for the collection, making a passionate argument that the film deserved recognition as serious cinema. In her defense, she described the movie as a work of art by a cutting-edge artist who is a master of movement, light, color, and shape, and also of chaos, razzle-dazzle, and explosion. Basinger's essay argued that Bay's visual style and technical mastery represented a legitimate form of artistic expression, even if the story and characters were simple. The Criterion release included a director's cut supervised by Bay himself, along with extensive special features and commentary tracks that treated the film as a serious work worthy of academic study and preservation.